Police shoot a black army officer. Minutes later, the military hits back hard. Part 1. The Quiet Before. Maya Jenkins had always believed in keeping her head down and her heart open. At 54 years old, she'd learned that survival often meant silence, and dignity meant choosing your battles carefully. She worked the morning shift at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, wiping down tables in the food court, restocking napkins, and offering warm smiles to travelers who rarely looked up from their phones. Her uniform was simple: navy blue polo, black pants, comfortable shoes worn soft from years of walking terminal floors. She'd been doing this work for nearly 12 years, ever since her husband passed and left her with 2 grown children and a mortgage that wouldn't pay itself. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and Maya Jenkins had built her entire life on honesty. That morning the sky outside hung heavy and bruised, clouds thick with unshed rain. Maya clocked in at 5:30, her movements practiced and efficient. She tied her graying locks back with a purple scrunchie, her daughter's favorite color, and grabbed her cleaning cart from the storage room. "Morning, Maya," called Sofia Vasquez, a young TSA officer who often stopped by for coffee. The girl couldn't have been more than 25, with kind eyes that hadn't yet learned to harden against the world. "Morning, baby," Maya replied warmly. "You eating breakfast today or just running on prayers again?" Sophia laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Prayers and coffee. I'm working checkpoint 14 today." Maya nodded, pushing her cart toward the food court. "You be safe out there. People get crazy in airports." She didn't know how prophetic those words would be. The morning shift was always the same: businessmen gulping down overpriced lattes, families juggling crying bobbies and carry-ons, flight attendants moving through the terminal like graceful swans navigating a pond. Maya moved among them invisibly, the way cleaning staff often did. People saw the uniform but never the person wearing it. She was wiping down a table near gate 14 when she first noticed him. A black man, probably around her age, maybe a few years younger. He wore a faded gray hoodie and dark jeans, moved with a precision that caught her attention. Not rushed, not nervous, just purposeful. There was something in his bearing that reminded Maya of her late husband, Marcus, who'd served 2 tours overseas before coming home to build a life with her. This man had that same quiet strength, that same way of reading a room without seeming to look at anyone directly. He passed her with a polite nod, and Maya found herself nodding back, something warm settling in her chest. Recognition, maybe. The kind that has nothing to do with faces and everything to do with understanding someone's journey just by the way they carry their shoulders. She returned to her cart, pulling out fresh sanitizer. The checkpoint nearby hummed with its usual chaos: belts being removed, laptops placed in bins, shoes tossed into gray plastic trays. She'd seen this dance thousands of times. But something felt different today. Maya couldn't explain it, but years of watching people had taught her to trust her instincts. There was tension in the air, thick and waiting, like the storm clouds outside that refused to break. At checkpoint 14, Officer Dustin Thorne stood with his arms crossed, his jaw set in that particular way that Maya had learned to recognize over the years. She'd seen men like him before, the ones who wore authority like armor, who confused power with respect. He'd only been at the airport a few weeks, but Maya had already learned to avoid him when possible. She'd watched him pull aside elderly women for random searches, seen the way his eyes lingered on certain travelers, always the ones with darker skin, always the ones who moved with too much confidence or not enough fear. The man in the gray hoodie approached the metal detector, placing his items carefully in the tray. Maya found herself slowing her work, something pulling at her attention. She heard his voice, calm and respectful. "Probably just a coin. Haven't worn these boots in months." Dustin's response was sharp, escalating. "Step aside, hands behind your back." Maya's hands stilled on the table she was cleaning. Her heart began to beat faster. Sophia's voice rose, uncertain but brave. He hasn't done anything wrong. Shut it, Vasquez. The words cracked through the terminal like a whip, and Maya felt her stomach drop. She'd heard that tone before, the sound of a man about to make a terrible mistake. She watched frozen as the situation spiraled. The man stayed calm, reaching slowly toward his boot. His movements were careful, non-threatening, the movements of someone who'd been trained to de-escalate. But Dustin's hand moved to his weapon, and Maya Jenkins, who'd spent 54 years learning to stay quiet and keep her head down, felt something ancient and powerful rise in her chest. Not today, she thought. Please God, not today. The sound of gunfire shattered the morning, and Maya's scream joined a chorus of others as the world exploded into chaos. Part 2. Blood on the terminal floor. The shots came in rapid succession, 3 distinct cracks that seemed to tear reality apart. Maya dropped behind her cleaning cart, her hands shaking so violently she could barely grip the metal handle. Around her, the terminal erupted into screaming chaos. Travelers scattered like startled birds, parents threw themselves over children, coffee cups shattered against tile floors in a percussion of breaking glass. "Stay down," someone shouted, but Maya couldn't tell who. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she peered around the cart. The man in the gray hoodie lay on the floor, blood spreading beneath him in a dark pool that reflected the harsh fluorescent lights above. But his eyes were open, calm, alert, impossibly steady. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't thrashing. He just lay there, breathing carefully, as if he'd been shot before and knew exactly how to survive it. Dustin stood frozen, his service weapon still raised, his face drained of color. "Shots fired," he gasped into his radio, voice trembling. "Suspect down, gate 14, need backup immediately." "Suspect," Sophia's voice cracked with disbelief. "He didn't do anything." Maya's training kicked in. Not TSA training, not airport protocol, but the training of a black woman who'd lived through decades of injustice. Document everything. Remember every detail. She pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands, her fingers fumbling to open the camera, but security was already rushing in, barking orders. "Everyone back, clear the area." Paramedics burst through the crowd, their equipment clattering as they knelt beside the fallen man. Maya watched through the chaos, her throat tight with unshed tears. She'd seen him walking just minutes ago, proud, purposeful, alive. Now he lay in his own blood while the man who'd shot him scrambled to justify what everyone with eyes had witnessed. "Sir, can you speak?" A paramedic pressed gauze against the wounds. "What's your name?" The man's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried authority that made everyone within earshot fall silent. "Colonel Alexander, Darien Alexander." The paramedic's hands froze. "Colonel." "Tell them I was here." His eyes closed briefly, then opened again, focusing on something beyond the ceiling tiles. "Just tell them Colonel A was here." Maya felt ice water flood her veins. She'd been right. This was a military man, a soldier, someone who'd served this country with honor. And Dustin Thorne had shot him for the crime of existing while black in an airport terminal. Dustin was already spinning his narrative, talking fast into his recorder, his voice taking on that official tone that Maya had learned to hate. "Suspect exhibited threatening behavior, reached toward his waistband. I had no choice but to neutralize the threat according to protocol." "You're lying." Sophia's voice rang clear across the checkpoint, young but unshakable. "He never reached for anything. You fired first." Dustin's eyes snapped to her, dangerous and cold. "You want to lose your job, Vasquez." "I want the truth." "You have no evidence." "I recorded everything." The silence that followed was absolute. Maya watched Dustin's face transform from anger to shock to pure fear in the space of a heartbeat. "You what?" "The moment your tone changed," Sophia said, her hand trembling as she touched her smartwatch. "I started recording. It's already backed up to my private cloud." That's illegal. So is shooting an unarmed veteran. Sophia's voice cracked, but she held her ground. You have no idea what you've done. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, hot and unstoppable. This girl, this brave, foolish, beautiful girl, had done what Maya herself had been too frightened to do. She'd created a record. She'd stood as a witness. She'd chosen truth over safety. No, Dustin, Sophia continued, her voice stronger now. You have no idea who you just shot. That's when Maya heard it, a sound that started low and grew steadily louder, like thunder rolling in from a distant storm. Everyone in the terminal froze, heads turning toward the windows. Black SUVs screeched to a halt outside, followed by armored vehicles that made the airport security trucks look like children's toys. Men in unmarked tactical uniforms poured out, moving with military precision, securing perimeters, establishing zones of control. A man in a gray suit strode through the terminal entrance, his badge held high. I'm Special Agent Marcus Webb, Pentagon Security. We're here for Colonel Darien Alexander. Where is he? The TSA supervisor, a heavy-set man named Gary who'd always been kind to Maya, stammered. Medical took him. They're loading him into an ambulance. Secure this scene immediately. Lock down the entire terminal. This facility is now under Pentagon authority. Maya watched through her tears as the world transformed around her. This wasn't just about one shooting anymore. This was something bigger, something that had been set in motion the moment Dustin Thorne had mistaken a decorated military officer for a threat. She looked down at the blood still pooling on the white tile floor, and something hardened in her chest. She'd spent her whole life cleaning up other people's messes, staying quiet, keeping her head down. She'd watched injustice happen and told herself it wasn't her place to speak up. But this blood, this man's blood, spilled for nothing but fear and prejudice. This was different. Maya Jenkins made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone again, and this time she didn't hesitate. She opened her camera and began recording. The blood, the chaos, the fear on Dustin's face, the military vehicles outside. She documented everything, her hands still shaking but her purpose crystal clear. If Sofia Vasquez could be brave, then so could she. Part 3. The Weight of Witness. The terminal had transformed into something Maya barely recognized. Military personnel moved through the space with clockwork precision, establishing cordons and directing shell-shocked travelers toward alternate gates. The food court where Maya had worked for 12 years now resembled a crime scene, yellow tape cordoning off the area around Checkpoint 14. Maya stood beside her cleaning cart, phone clutched in her trembling hand, the video she'd recorded burning like a secret in her palm. Around her, TSA management had arrived, their faces grave as they huddled with the Pentagon officials. Dustin Thorne sat on a bench near the wall, his head in his hands, flanked by 2 airport security officers who weren't quite touching him but weren't letting him leave either. Sofia Vasquez stood apart from everyone, her young face aged by what she'd witnessed. When her eyes met Maya's across the chaos, something passed between them: recognition, solidarity, the understanding that comes when 2 people choose truth over safety in the same moment. Maya moved slowly through the crowd, her cleaning uniform making her invisible as always. She'd learned long ago that being overlooked had its advantages. She reached Sofia just as a TSA supervisor approached, his clipboard clutched like a shield. Officer Vasquez, I need to see your smartwatch. Company property. We need to review any recordings made during the incident. Sofia's jaw tightened. The recording is on my personal cloud account, not company property. The watch is company issued. The data is mine. Maya watched the supervisor's face flush with frustration. He was trying to decide how hard to push when Agent Webb appeared beside them, his presence commanding immediate silence. Miss Vasquez, I'm Special Agent Webb. I understand you have video evidence of the shooting. His voice was professional but not unkind. "That evidence will be crucial to our investigation. I need you to preserve it exactly as it is. Don't delete anything, don't share it, and don't let anyone, including TSA management, confiscate your device." The supervisor sputtered, "Now wait just a minute. This is a federal investigation into an assault on a decorated military officer." Webb's voice hardened. "Pentagon authority supersedes TSA protocol. Miss Vasquez's evidence is now under federal protection, and any attempt to tamper with or destroy it will be treated as obstruction of justice." Maya felt her heart swell with something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Real, tangible hope that justice might actually be served. Webb turned to the supervisor. "I also want security footage from every camera in this terminal for the past 24 hours, and I want a complete personnel file on Officer Thorne, including why he was transferred here and what happened at his previous posting." The supervisor's face went pale. "I don't have authorization." "You do now." Webb handed him a document. "Presidential directive, full cooperation, zero obstruction. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." As the supervisor hurried away, Webb's eyes landed on Maya. She froze, suddenly aware of her phone still in her hand, the video still saved on her device. "Ma'am, were you here when the shooting occurred?" Maya's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Yes, sir. I work here. I clean the terminals." "Did you see what happened?" She hesitated. Speaking up meant becoming visible, becoming a target. It meant stepping out of the safety of silence she'd cultivated for decades. But then she thought of the man bleeding on her clean floor, the calm way he'd said, "Tell them Colonel A was here," as if his identity was more important than his wounds. "I saw everything," Maya said, her voice stronger now. "I saw Officer Thorne escalate the situation for no reason. I saw Colonel Alexander trying to cooperate, and I saw the shooting." Webb's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "Did you record anything?" Maya's hand tightened on her phone. This was it, the moment where she chose sides, where she decided whether to be brave or safe. She thought of her daughter, her son, the grandchildren she hoped to meet someday. She thought of everything she could lose. Then she thought of Marcus, her late husband, who'd served his country with honor and come home to a nation that still saw him as suspicious first and heroic second. "Yes, sir," Maya said quietly. "I recorded everything after the shooting. The scene, the response, the military arrival, it's all here." Webb nodded slowly. "I'm going to need you to send that video to a secure federal email address. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "And I'm going to need a formal statement from you. Everything you saw, everything you heard. Will you provide that?" Maya felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from the overwhelming relief of finally, being asked to tell the truth by someone who might actually listen. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "I'll tell you everything." Across the terminal, Dustin Thorne looked up and saw Maya talking to the federal agent. Their eyes met, and Maya watched fear transform into rage on his face. He knew. He knew she'd witnessed his crime, and he knew she was talking. A TSA supervisor, a different one, younger, more aggressive, approached Dustin and whispered something in his ear. Dustin nodded, then stood, his jaw set in determination. Even from a distance, Maya could read his body language. He was preparing to fight back, to spin his narrative, to paint himself as the victim and Colonel Alexander as the threat. She'd seen this before. The system protecting its own. The story being rewritten to favor the person with the badge and the gun. The witnesses being dismissed or discredited until the truth became just another version of events, no more valid than the lie. But this time was different. This time, there were recordings. This time, the victim was someone the Pentagon cared about protecting. This time, two women had chosen to be brave when being silent would have been so much easier. Sophia appeared at Maya's elbow, her face set with quiet determination. "They're trying to take my watch," she said softly. My supervisor said it's company property and I need to surrender it. Agent Webb said they can't do that, Maya replied. They're going to try anyway. Sophia's voice trembled slightly. I'm only 6 weeks into this job, Maya. If I fight them, I'll lose everything. Maya looked at this girl, this brave, beautiful girl who'd done the right thing without hesitation, and felt a fierce protectiveness rise in her chest. Then we fight together, Maya said firmly, and we don't stop until the truth comes out. Part 4, the system shows its teeth. By noon, the terminal had been cleared and sanitized, the blood mopped away, the yellow tape removed. To anyone arriving at Hartsfield-Jackson that afternoon, Gate 14 looked like any other checkpoint, functional, forgettable, clean. But Maya Jenkins would never forget what that floor had looked like stained with an innocent man's blood. She'd been told to go home to rest, that someone would contact her for a formal statement. But Maya hadn't gone home. Instead, she changed out of her uniform in the employee locker room and sat in the airport chapel, a small interfaith space tucked between terminals where travelers came to pray before flights or grieve after receiving bad news mid-journey. She sat in the back pew, her phone in her lap, Sofia Vasquez sitting beside her. Neither woman spoke for a long time. They simply existed together in the quiet, processing trauma that hadn't had time to settle into memory yet. They suspended me, Sofia finally said, her voice hollow. Pending investigation. They said I violated protocol by recording without authorization. Maya's hand found the younger woman's and squeezed tight. Agent Webb said your recording is protected. Webb isn't my employer, TSA is, and they want me gone. Sofia turned to look at Maya, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. She'd cried herself out hours ago. My supervisor said if I voluntarily delete the video and sign a statement saying I was mistaken about what I saw, they'll reinstate me. No discipline. Clean record. They're trying to buy your silence. They're trying to save Officer Thorne's career. Sofia's laugh was bitter and broken. You know what the worst part is? It's working exactly how they want it to. I need this job, Maya. I'm supporting my mom and my little brother. We barely make rent as it is, if I lose this paycheck. She trailed off, but Maya understood. This was how the system worked. It didn't need to threaten you directly. It just had to make the cost of honesty higher than most people could afford to pay. What are you going to do? Maya asked gently. Sofia was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her smartwatch and looked at it, really looked at it, as if seeing it for the first time. My mom came here from El Salvador when she was 17, she said softly. No papers, no money, no English. She worked 3 jobs to give me and my brother a chance at something better. And she always told me, Mija, the truth is the only thing they can't take from you if you hold it tight enough. She looked up at Maya, and in her eyes was a strength that age had nothing to do with. I'm keeping the video, and I'm telling the truth, even if it costs me everything. Maya felt tears slip down her cheeks. Then I'm standing with you. My recording goes public too. Maya, you could lose your job. I'm 54 years old, and I've been cleaning floors for 12 years while men like Dustin Thorne wear badges they don't deserve. Maya's voice was steady now, certain. I've been quiet my whole life, Sofia. I've watched injustice happen and told myself it wasn't my place to speak up. But there comes a moment when staying silent becomes its own kind of sin. The chapel door opened and Agent Webb stepped inside, his expression grave. Ladies, I need to speak with both of you. It's about Colonel Alexander. They followed him to a small conference room the airport kept for security briefings. Inside, 2 other Pentagon officials waited, along with a woman in a sharp suit who introduced herself as Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Williams, Judge Advocate General's Corps. Colonel Alexander is in surgery, Williams began without preamble. 3 gunshot wounds, shoulder, chest, and abdomen. He's stable but critical. The surgeons say he's lucky to be alive and that his military training probably saved him. Most people would have panicked. He stayed calm and controlled his breathing to minimize blood loss. Maya felt her stomach clench. Will he survive? The doctors are optimistic, but that's not why I asked you here. Williams opened a tablet and turned it toward them. I need to show you something. This is Officer Dustin Thorne's personnel file. What I'm about to share is normally confidential, but given the circumstances and your role as material witnesses, you need to understand what we're dealing with. The screen showed disciplinary records, complaints, incident reports. Maya's hands clenched as she read through them. Allegations of racial profiling at his previous posting in Dallas, excessive force complaints that had been resolved internally, transfers that looked less like career progression and more like an organization shuffling a problem from place to place. He should never have been hired here, Sophia whispered. These complaints, they're all the same pattern. Why was he still working? Because the system protects its own, Williams said bluntly. TSA management knew about these complaints. They hired him anyway because he had friends in the regional office, and because making a bad hire look good is easier than admitting you made a mistake. Until now. Webb leaned forward. Your recordings change everything. Without them, this becomes a he said situation. Thorne's story against a wounded victims. And in those situations, the badge usually wins. But with video evidence from 2 independent witnesses, we have a case. A real case for prosecution. What happens now? Maya asked. Now we build the case carefully, Williams replied. Thorne's lawyer, and he'll have a good one provided by the police union, will try to discredit both of you. They'll dig into your backgrounds, your social media, your financial records. They'll look for anything they can use to paint you as unreliable or biased. Are you prepared for that? Maya thought of her small house, her simple life. She had nothing to hide, but she knew that wouldn't matter. They'd find something. They always did. Yes, she said quietly, I'm prepared. Williams's expression softened. Mrs. Jenkins, I want you to understand what you're walking into. The media will find you. Thorne's supporters will attack you. You'll receive threats. Your life will become very difficult for a while. Colonel Alexander's life became difficult the moment he got shot for being black in an airport, Maya replied. I think I can handle some phone calls and mean comments. Webb actually smiled at that. All right then, here's what happens next. Part 5, Truth Rising Like Floodwater. The story broke that evening, first on local Atlanta news, then spreading like wildfire across national networks. Decorated Army colonel shot at airport, Pentagon launches investigation. The headlines varied slightly, but the core remained the same. Something terrible had happened at Hartsfield-Jackson, and someone was going to answer for it. Maya watched the news from her small living room, her daughter Keisha sitting beside her on the worn couch they'd bought together 15 years ago. On screen, a reporter stood outside the airport, face grave with rehearsed concern, while behind her security personnel moved in and out of frame. Colonel Darien Alexander, a 29-year military veteran with multiple commendations for valor, was shot 3 times by TSA officer Dustin Thorne during what witnesses describe as a routine security screening. The Pentagon has taken over the investigation, and federal charges are being considered. Keisha squeezed her mother's hand. Mama, are you sure about this? Going on record. I'm sure, baby. They're going to come after you. You know that, right? The police union, the TSA, all of them. Maya turned to look at her daughter, 31 years old, a nurse at Grady Memorial, with her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn jaw. When you were little, maybe 7 or 8, you asked me why your daddy had to go fight in a war. You remember what I told you? Keisha's eyes glistened. You said he went because some things are worth standing up for, even when standing up is dangerous. That's right, and I've spent the years since he died forgetting that lesson, staying quiet, keeping safe. But your daddy didn't die so I could spend the rest of my life afraid to speak truth. Maya's voice cracked slightly. He died believing this country could be better. I owe it to him, and to Colonel Alexander to believe that too." Her phone buzzed. Another call from a reporter. Maya silenced it. Agent Webb had instructed her not to speak to media yet, not until after she'd given her formal statement. But the reporters had found her anyway. They always did. Across town, in her mother's small apartment, Sofia Vasquez stared at her own phone as it lit up with notifications. Text messages, voicemails, emails, some supportive, many viciously cruel. The police union had released a statement calling her a disgruntled employee with a history of insubordination, who had violated department policy and federal law by illegally recording a fellow officer. Neither claim was true, but truth mattered less than narrative in the court of public opinion. Her little brother, Carlos, sat at the kitchen table doing homework, trying to pretend he couldn't hear their mother crying in the bedroom. Sofia wanted to comfort her, to promise that everything would be okay, but she didn't know if that was true. "Is Mama going to be all right?" Carlos asked quietly. "Yes," Sofia lied. Then more honestly, "Eventually. This is hard right now, but it's going to get better. Because you told the truth. Because telling the truth is the only way things ever get better." Carlos considered this with the seriousness only a 10-year-old could muster. "My teacher said people who tell the truth when it's dangerous are heroes." Sofia felt tears burn her eyes. "Your teacher is very smart." "Does that mean you're a hero?" She pulled him close, pressing her face into his hair. "It means I'm trying to be." Her phone rang again. Webb this time, she answered. "Miss Vasquez, I need you to come to the federal building tomorrow at 9. We're taking formal statements, and I want you to walk us through everything you saw and heard. Bring your smartwatch." "Will Mrs. Jenkins be there?" "Yes, and I've arranged for both of you to have legal representation present. The attorney is pro bono. She specializes in whistleblower protection." Sofia closed her eyes, relief washing through her. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow is when the real fight begins." The next morning, Maya dressed carefully in her Sunday clothes, a navy blue dress with a white collar, modest heels, her mother's pearl earrings. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had she become so old? When had fear carved itself so deeply into the lines around her eyes? She thought of Dustin Thorne, probably also getting dressed this morning, probably also preparing for battle. The difference was, he'd be surrounded by union lawyers and fellow officers, all willing to spin lies into something resembling truth. She had only her word, her recording, and her conviction that justice still meant something. It would have to be enough. At the federal building, security was tight. Maya passed through metal detectors, grimly ironic, given why she was here, and was escorted to a conference room on the 7th floor. Sofia was already there, sitting beside a woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm Rebecca Howard, your attorney. Please sit." Maya sat, her hands folded in her lap the way her mother had taught her, proper, dignified, composed. Rebecca slid a document across the table. "Before we begin, I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. This investigation is being conducted by the Pentagon's Office of the Inspector General, with cooperation from the FBI and the Justice Department. Your testimony will be recorded, transcribed, and may be used in criminal prosecution. You may also be called to testify in court. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "You're not under arrest and you're not a suspect. You're a witness. That means you have rights. You can refuse to answer any question. You can stop the interview at any time. You can consult with me privately before responding to anything. Are you clear on that?" "Yes, ma'am." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Jenkins, I've reviewed the video you recorded. It's good evidence. Combined with Miss Vasquez's footage, we have a strong case. But I need you to be prepared for what comes next. TSA is going to claim you're biased. They'll say you had a grudge against Officer Thorne, that you manipulated the footage, that you're looking for a settlement. Can you handle that?" Maya met her eyes steadily. "Miss Howard, I'm a 54-year-old black woman who's been cleaning airport floors for 12 years. People have been calling me worse than biased my whole life. I can handle it." A small smile touched Rebecca's lips. "All right then, let's go tell the truth." Part 6. The walls begin to crack. The deposition room was smaller than Maya expected, windowless and sterile, with a long table and recording equipment that looked like it belonged in a television drama. Agent Webb sat across from her, flanked by two other investigators whose names she immediately forgot. Rebecca Howard sat at her right, a legal pad and 3 pens arranged precisely in front of her. "Mrs. Jenkins, thank you for coming," Webb began. "We're going to record this interview. Please state your full name and address for the record." Maya leaned toward the microphone. "Maya Louise Jenkins. I live at Fort Welve Peachtree Circle, Atlanta, Georgia." "And you work at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport?" "Yes, sir. I'm on the janitorial staff. I've worked there 12 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Webb's eyebrow rose slightly. "That's very specific." "I remember my start date," Maya said simply. "October 15th, 2013. 3 months after my husband passed. I needed the job, so I remember." Something in Webb's expression shifted, a recognition perhaps of the weight some people carry. "Walk me through the morning of November 1st, everything you saw and heard." So Maya did. She spoke slowly, carefully, painting the scene with words the way an artist might with brushes. She described the gray morning, the quiet rhythm of her work, the man in the hoodie who moved with military precision. She recounted every word she'd overheard, every escalation, every moment of Dustin Thorne's aggressive posturing. "He kept ordering Colonel Alexander to put his hands behind his back," Maya said. "But the colonel was just trying to show him the coin. He was being so calm, so respectful. And Officer Thorne he saw danger where there wasn't any." "How do you know there was no danger?" Maya looked directly at Webb. "Because I've been watching travelers for 12 years, Agent Webb. I know what a threat looks like. I've seen angry drunks, violent passengers, people having mental health crises. Colonel Alexander wasn't any of those things. He was just a black man trying to catch a flight." One of the other investigators, a woman with auburn hair, spoke up. "Mrs. Jenkins, were you aware of Colonel Alexander's identity at the time of the shooting?" "No, ma'am. I learned his name when the paramedics did." "So when you decided to record the scene, you didn't know he was a high-ranking military officer?" Maya understood what she was being asked, whether her actions were motivated by the victim's status rather than the injustice itself. "No, ma'am. I recorded because I saw a man bleeding on my floor and another man lying about how he got there. Colonel Alexander could have been anybody, and it still would have been wrong." The interview continued for 2 hours, Webb and his team walking through every detail multiple times, asking questions from different angles, testing her memory and her consistency. Maya answered each question truthfully, sometimes saying, "I don't know," when she didn't, refusing to speculate or embellish. Finally, Webb sat back. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm going to show you some video footage. This is security camera footage from the airport, combined with Miss Vasquez's smartwatch recording. I want you to watch it and tell me if this matches what you witnessed." They dimmed the lights. The screen flickered to life, showing the checkpoint from multiple angles. Maya watched herself push her cleaning cart into frame, watched Colonel Alexander approach security with that calm, measured stride. She watched Dustin Thorne's body language shift from professional distance to aggressive suspicion. Then came the moment that would haunt her forever. Colonel Alexander slowly reaching toward his boot, Dustin's hand moving to his weapon, Sophia stepping forward saying something, Dustin's snarled response. And then the shots, 3 quick flashes, Colonel Alexander falling, blood spreading, chaos erupting. The footage continued, showing Dustin's immediate attempt to justify his actions, Sophia's brave confrontation, the arrival of Pentagon forces. Maya watched herself emerge from behind her cart, phone raised, recording the aftermath with shaking hands. When the lights came back up, Maya's face was wet with tears. "That's what I saw," she whispered. "That's exactly what happened." Webb nodded slowly. "Mrs. Jenkins, based on your testimony and the video evidence, we believe Officer Thorne committed assault with a deadly weapon, filing a false police report and civil rights violations. The Justice Department is preparing charges." Maya felt her heart leap. "You're going to prosecute him?" "Yes, but Mrs. Jenkins, I need you to understand something." Webb's expression grew serious. "The police union is preparing a vigorous defense. They're going to argue that Officer Thorne perceived a genuine threat, that his actions were justified under TSA protocols, and that Colonel Alexander's behavior was suspicious. They're going to put both you and Miss Vasquez on trial in the court of public opinion before this ever reaches a real courtroom." "Let them," Maya said quietly. "Truth doesn't change just because people try to argue with it." "No," Webb agreed, "but it gets buried sometimes, and digging it back out requires people like you to keep speaking, even when it costs them everything. Are you prepared for that?" Maya thought of her husband, of the flag they'd given her at his funeral, of the promise she'd made to him that she'd be brave when it mattered. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm prepared." Across town, in a lawyer's office that smelled of leather and old money, Dustin Thorne sat with his attorney and 2 union representatives. The lawyer, Richard Stanton, was known for getting officers acquitted in even the most damning circumstances. He had silver hair, expensive suits, and a reputation for turning victims into villains with surgical precision. "The problem," Stanton said, tapping a pen against his legal pad, "is the video. 2 separate recordings, multiple angles, audio that clearly captures your escalation. That's difficult to overcome." He reached for something, Dustin insisted. "I saw a threat." "You saw a black man existing in a space where you didn't think he belonged." One of the union reps, a woman named Patricia, cut in. "And now a decorated war hero is in critical condition because you couldn't control your bias." Dustin's face flushed. "That's not fair." "Fair doesn't matter, optics matter, and the optics here are terrible." Patricia leaned forward. "The Pentagon is involved. The FBI is involved. Justice Department is preparing federal charges. This isn't going away with a settlement and a transfer, Dustin. This is your career, your freedom, possibly your life." The room fell silent. Finally, Stanton spoke. "We have one chance. We need to destroy the credibility of the witnesses, make the jury and the public believe that Maya Jenkins and Sophia Vasquez are lying or mistaken. If we can create reasonable doubt about their testimony, we can argue that the video doesn't show what they claim it shows." "How do we do that?" Dustin asked. Stanton smiled, cold and calculating. "We do what defense attorneys have always done. We put the witnesses on trial instead of you." Part 7. The Fire Before Dawn. The media storm broke like a dam collapsing. Within 48 hours, Maya's name was everywhere: cable news, social media, think pieces written by people who'd never met her but felt qualified to judge her character. The narrative fractured along predictable lines. To some, she was a hero standing up against injustice. To others, she was an opportunist seeking attention or settlement money. Someone found her Facebook page and screenshotted every post, searching for anything that could be twisted into evidence of bias. They found a post from 3 years ago where she'd shared an article about police reform with a heart emoji. Within hours, it was being presented as proof of her anti-law enforcement agenda. They found photos of her late husband in his army uniform and claimed she was biased against TSA because they weren't real military. They dug up her employment records and noted every sick day, every minor infraction, trying to paint her as an unreliable employee with a grudge. The attacks on Sophia were even more vicious. Immigration hardliners seized on her mother's undocumented past, something Sophia had never tried to hide, and used it to question her loyalty and credibility. Radio talk show hosts speculated about her real motives, suggesting she'd recorded the incident hopping to sue the government. Maya sat in her living room watching herself become a character in someone else's story, feeling helpless and furious. Keisha had taken time off work to stay with her, screening calls and monitoring social media to shield her mother from the worst of it. "Mama, you need to see this," Keisha said, her face pale as she held up her phone. It was a news clip from a conservative network. A host Maya didn't recognize was interviewing Richard Stanton, Dustin's attorney. The chyron read, "TSA officer faces charges after controversial shooting. Defense claims witness bias." "Look, the facts are simple," Stanton said, his voice smooth and reasonable. "My client encountered a suspicious individual who refused to comply with lawful orders. Officer Thorne followed his training exactly as prescribed. Now, two witnesses with clear anti-law enforcement views are trying to destroy a good man's career. We have to ask ourselves, are we going to let political agendas override legitimate security concerns?" The host nodded sympathetically. "And what about this Colonel Alexander? Why was he traveling without proper identification?" "Exactly. What was he hiding? Why did he refuse to identify himself properly? These are questions the Pentagon doesn't want us asking." Maya felt her blood turn to ice. They were doing it, twisting the story, making Colonel Alexander suspicious, making Dustin the victim, making truth itself something negotiable. Her phone rang. Webb. "Don't watch the news," he said without preamble. "Too late. Mrs. Jenkins, I need you to stay strong. This is what they do. They try to win in the media because they know they'll lose in court. The evidence is overwhelmingly against Thorne. But if they can make enough people doubt the witnesses, they can create a hostile environment for prosecution. What do I do?" "You keep telling the truth, and you trust that justice works even when it's slow." After they hung up, Maya sat in silence for a long time. Then she stood, walked to her bedroom and pulled a box from the top shelf of her closet. Inside was Marcus's flag, folded in the precise triangle she'd received at his funeral. Beneath it were his medals, his commendations, photographs of him in uniform. She carried the box back to the living room and set it on the coffee table. "Keisha, get your phone. I want to record something." "Mama, Agent Webb said not to talk to media." "I'm not talking to media. I'm talking to people. There's a difference." Keisha positioned her phone while Maya sat in her armchair, her husband's flag visible in the frame behind her. She took a breath, gathered her courage, and began to speak. "My name is Maya Jenkins. I'm the woman who recorded the aftermath of Colonel Darien Alexander's shooting at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. People are saying I'm biased against law enforcement, that I have an agenda, that I can't be trusted. So I want to tell you about my husband." She picked up a photograph, Marcus in his dress uniform, young and proud and alive. Staff Sergeant Marcus Jenkins served 2 tours in Iraq. He believed in service, in duty, in protecting this country even when this country didn't always protect him. He came home with PTSD and a Purple Heart, and he died 6 years later from complications related to injuries he sustained overseas. Maya's voice cracked but held. "I don't hate law enforcement. I hate injustice. I hate watching people abuse authority. I hate seeing someone bleed on my floor because an officer couldn't see past his prejudice. My husband served this country with honor, and so did Colonel Alexander, and I will not be silent while people try to justify what happened to him." She looked directly at the camera. "You want to attack my character? Fine. You want to dig through my life looking for reasons to dismiss me? Go ahead. But you will not erase what I saw. You will not make Colonel Alexander into a suspect instead of a victim, and you will not silence me with lies." Keisha stopped recording, her eyes bright with tears. "Mama, that was perfect." "Post it," Maya said. "Everywhere, let them see me. Let them hear me. I'm done being invisible." The video went viral within hours. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of shares. The narrative began to shift, not completely, not everywhere, but enough. People started asking questions. Why had Dustin Thorne been hired despite his problematic record? Why was TSA protecting him? What really happened at Gate 14? More witnesses came forward, travelers who'd been there, who'd seen the shooting, who corroborated Maya and Sophia's accounts. Security experts analyzed the footage and confirmed that Colonel Alexander had exhibited no threatening behavior. Military veterans, both black and white, spoke out about the disrespect shown to a decorated officer. The pressure mounted. TSA announced an independent review of the incident. The police union's support for Thorne became more qualified, more defensive. Cracks appeared in the wall they'd built around him. And in a hospital room across town, Colonel Darien Alexander opened his eyes for the first time in 3 days. Part 8: Justice, Slow but Sure. The courtroom was smaller than Maya had imagined, less dramatic than the television version she'd built in her mind. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, uncomfortable benches where she sat between Keisha and Rebecca Howard, watching justice move at its grinding, deliberate pace. It had been 4 months since the shooting. 4 months of legal motions, media battles, and countless nights when Maya questioned whether any of this mattered. But today, finally today, the preliminary hearing would determine if Dustin Thorne would face trial. He sat at the defense table in a dark suit, looking nothing like the aggressive officer who'd fired 3 shots into an unarmed man. His lawyers had crafted a new image for him: humble, regretful, a good officer who'd made a split-second decision under pressure. Maya wanted to scream at the performance of it all. Colonel Alexander sat in the front row, his arm still in a sling, his presence commanding even in civilian clothes. He'd insisted on attending despite his doctor's concerns. When Maya had finally met him 2 weeks prior, he'd taken her hand and said simply, "Thank you for being brave." Those 4 words had sustained her through the worst of the attacks. Sophia sat on the other side of the aisle with her mother and Carlos. She'd lost her TSA job despite federal whistleblower protections. They'd found a technicality about recording policies. But a GoFundMe started by supporters had raised enough to cover their expenses while she looked for new work. More importantly, several civil rights organizations had offered her positions, recognizing the courage it took to stand against the system from inside it. The judge entered, an older black woman named Harriet Owens, with gray locks and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and believed nothing. She surveyed the courtroom with the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. "We're here for the preliminary hearing in the matter of United States versus Dustin Michael Thorne," she began. "The defendant is charged with assault with a deadly weapon, deprivation of rights under color of law, and making false statements to federal investigators. The prosecution will present evidence to establish probable cause for trial." The assistant U.S. attorney, a sharp woman named Jennifer Wallace, stood. "Your Honor, the government will show through video evidence, witness testimony, and expert analysis that the defendant's actions were not only unjustified but criminal. He profiled, targeted, and shot an unarmed veteran who posed no threat, then lied about the incident in an attempt to cover up his actions." Over the next 3 hours, Maya watched as the prosecution methodically built their case. They played Sophia's smartwatch footage, showing the entire incident from multiple angles. They called in security experts who testified that Colonel Alexander's behavior showed no signs of aggression or threat. They presented Dustin's disciplinary records from his previous posting, establishing a pattern of racial profiling and excessive force. When they called Maya to testify, she stood on legs that trembled but held. Rebecca had prepared her for this, walking her through potential questions until Maya could answer in her sleep. But no amount of preparation could eliminate the fear of speaking truth to power in a room designed to intimidate. "Mrs. Jenkins," Wallace began gently, "please tell the court what you witnessed on the morning of November 1st. Maya took a breath and told her story again, simply, clearly, without embellishment. She described the escalation, the shooting, the blood on her clean floor. She explained why she'd started recording, not because of who Colonel Alexander was, but because of what had been done to him. During cross-examination, Richard Stanton tried every trick in his expensive playbook. He questioned her eyesight, her memory, her motives. He brought up the Facebook post, the employment records, even her husband's military service, trying to suggest bias. "Mrs. Jenkins, isn't it true that you harbor resentment toward airport security because you believe they don't show proper respect to military personnel?" Maya met his eyes steadily. "Mr. Stanton, I don't resent airport security. I resent officers who abuse their authority. And yes, I believe military veterans deserve respect, especially when they're not threatening anyone." "You recorded this incident on your personal phone, correct?" "Yes, sir." "Hoping to profit from it perhaps? A lawsuit, a book deal?" "No, sir. I recorded it because I was a witness to a crime, and I wanted there to be evidence that couldn't be erased or rewritten." "Very convenient that you happened to be there with your phone." "Mr. Stanton," Judge Owens interrupted, her voice sharp as glass, "are you suggesting this witness orchestrated being present during an officer-involved shooting? Because that's not only ridiculous, it's insulting to this court's intelligence." Stanton backtracked quickly, but the damage was done. The jury, when there eventually was one, would remember the judge's rebuke. After Maya stepped down, they called Sophia, who testified with the same calm conviction. Then Colonel Alexander himself took the stand, his voice quiet but clear as he described the incident from his perspective. "I've been in war zones, Your Honor. I've been shot at by enemy combatants. I know what a genuine threat looks like. I presented none of that. I was compliant, respectful, calm. And I was shot anyway for the crime of existing while black in an airport terminal." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Finally, Judge Owens called for closing arguments. Wallace spoke first, summarizing the overwhelming evidence. Stanton countered, trying to inject reasonable doubt, suggesting that fear and training could explain Dustin's actions. Then Judge Owens delivered her ruling. "I've reviewed the evidence presented today," she began, her voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. "The video footage is clear and unambiguous. Colonel Alexander exhibited no threatening behavior. Officer Thorne escalated a routine interaction into a violent confrontation without justification. His subsequent false statements compound the severity of his actions." She looked directly at Dustin. "Mr. Thorne, I find probable cause exists for all charges. You will be bound over for trial. Bail is set at $100,000. This court is adjourned." The gavel fell like thunder. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as Keisha pulled her into a hug. Across the aisle, Sophia was crying too, her mother holding her tight. Colonel Alexander sat quietly, his eyes closed, his face peaceful. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Maya was ready this time. She stood at the microphone with Sophia beside her, two ordinary women who'd refused to be silent. "Justice moved slowly," Maya said, her voice steady and strong. "But it moved. Today we proved that truth matters, that witnesses matter, that black lives matter enough to fight for. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about saying no more. No more shootings without consequences. No more lies covering up violence. No more treating people as suspicious simply because of the color of their skin." A reporter called out, "What do you say to people who still support Officer Thorne?" Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. I say I understand that this is complicated, that law enforcement is difficult, that officers face real dangers, but none of that justifies what happened to Colonel Alexander. None of that excuses profiling, escalation, or violence against innocent people. We can support good officers while holding bad ones accountable. That's not anti-police. That's justice. 3 months later, Dustin Thorne was convicted on all charges. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the jury deliberated for only 4 hours. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Not enough, Maya thought, but more than many officers ever faced. TSA implemented new training programs on implicit bias and de-escalation. The airport installed additional cameras at all checkpoints. It wasn't revolution, but it was change. Maya returned to work at the airport, walking through those same terminals with her head held higher now. Travelers still didn't see her, still looked past the woman in the navy blue uniform pushing the cleaning cart. But Maya didn't need to be seen to know her worth anymore. One morning, 6 months after the trial, she was wiping down tables near Gate 14 when she saw him, Colonel Alexander, walking through the terminal in jeans and a sweater, moving with that same purposeful stride. He was meeting his son, who'd earned his commission at West Point and was heading overseas for his first deployment. Their eyes met across the chaos of the terminal. He smiled, nodded once, and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Maya nodded back, tears pricking her eyes. She didn't need anything more than that. That evening, sitting in her small house with Keisha beside her and Marcus's flag still on the mantel, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the peace of silence or avoidance, but the peace that comes from standing up when it matters, from choosing truth over safety, from being brave when the world demanded she be small. She thought of all the years she'd spent invisible, all the injustices she'd witnessed in silence. She thought of the woman she'd been before that November morning, and the woman she'd become after. Sometimes, Maya realized, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to look away. Refuse to stay quiet. Refuse to let the system erase what you've witnessed. She picked up her phone and opened a new note, typing slowly. "My name is Maya Jenkins. I'm 54 years old. I clean airport floors. And when I witnessed injustice, I chose to be brave. Not because I'm special or heroic, but because staying silent would have killed something essential in me. This is for every person who thinks they're too small to make a difference, too invisible to matter. You matter. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." She saved the note, not sure if she'd ever share it, not sure if anyone would read it if she did. But it was there, a reminder to herself of who she'd become, of the power that exists in ordinary people who decide to do extraordinary things. Outside her window, Atlanta settled into evening, the city lights twinkling like stars. Somewhere in that vast expanse, other Maya Jenkinses were cleaning floors, watching injustice, wondering if speaking up was worth the cost. She hoped her story would reach them. She hoped they would know it was worth it. Every single time it was worth it. Because truth doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs to be spoken. And Maya Jenkins, humble, invisible, extraordinary Maya Jenkins, had spoken hers with a voice that changed everything. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Unbroken Gray Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.